So Brother Eggman continues, not only do we see the rapture occurring in this passage, but it also reinforces the timeline we discussed in part 4, namely that the saints will be taken off the earth before the wrath of God is poured out. And that's what we're seeing here. Verse 20 focuses the reader's attention on the climax of God's wrath, the Battle of Armageddon. So it's still consistent with not only a pre-wrath model where we have rapture first and then retribution second, i.e. when we go back to one of these slides, such as, let me back up. We could do this one. Notice in this slide, we've got rapture being that event that initiates the day of the Lord and God's wrath. That's the white and black arrows kissing each other there 3/4 of the way into the screen. And then over on the far right, we have second coming, the single black arrow pointing down, which is indicative of Jesus coming back to planet Earth to deal out final eschatological punishment and bring the Antichrist and his beast kingdom to an end, render the Antichrist useless, and eventually throw him into the lake of fire. But to battle him at the Battle of Armageddon, this final, last battle that takes place between Jesus and the Antichrist, that is the final battle. After that, we don't have any battles that are significant to the point that there's even any need to write more details. We do have a final battle at the end of the millennium where Satan is released out of his 1,000-year prison and he musters up an army once again that is referred to as Magog, right? Gog and Magog. So he chooses a leader again. We know it's not the Antichrist because he's already been thrown into the lake of fire. But the point being is that there's another battle to try and defeat Jesus, similar to the Battle of Armageddon. It's almost like Armageddon 2.0, and yet it's not even a contest. Jesus, fire comes out down from heaven and just wipes everybody out. There's just no. It's not even worth mentioning, really. But point being is that in what we just read in Revelation chapter 14, with the two reapings, the two sickles being swung over the earth, the point that's consistent with the pre-wrath model that we're trying to make a case for is that the rapture takes place first, and then the Battle of Armageddon, or the mop-up on planet Earth, takes place second in that picture that we just saw in Revelation chapter 14, between those two sickle events. All right, let's keep reading. Jesus coming, this is Brother AARON Eggman. Jesus coming is of one time period that contains many events within it. Again, I do have to jump back over to this slide. We're talking about, where is it? Keep going. I should put these closer to each other. We're talking about this slide. Brother AARON Eggman is also emphasizing the same thing that we pre-wrathers also emphasize. One Parousia, one single coming, yet two significant events. I keep having to stress this because the post-tribbers are the ones who smash these two events back together. The rapture and the second coming, according to most post-trib models, conflate these two events into one event. So this slide is a representation of theology that is different from post-trib. Even though I share a lot of affinity with most post-trib teaching, this is one place where I make a break from them. They don't seem to catch the importance of the fact that rapture and second coming are described in the Bible as different enough to be two separate events that are actually connected. It's part of one single event. They seem to focus on the singleness of the event and then just overlap the two events as if they're back to back with no space between them to allow for the day of the Lord to be poured out in its normal, customary, literal fashion. I don't know why they do that. It just doesn't make sense, good sense of the text. Instead, if you probably are aware, the pre-trib model actually also separates these two events. So if you're thinking, hey, Ariel, doesn't that look just like a pre-trib one? I mean, if you look at this model right here, pre-trib rapture, notice the rapture is on the far left of the screen, and then God's wrath occupies the entire 7 years in the middle, and then the second coming is on the far right. And you're going, Ariel, that looks identical to this one, right? Aren't they the same? Rapture on the far left, day of the Lord in the middle, second coming on the right. Well, yeah, they do look pretty similar. I mean, at face value, unless you know what you're looking at, yeah, they look the same. Rapture on the one end, second coming on the other end, day of the Lord in the middle. I mean, right? Look the same to me. Oh, but here's the big difference. The length of the time frame that I'm describing in this slide as Day of the Lord, the length is not 7 years long. And why is that significant? It's because the length also is an indicator of whether or not the events between the two, whether or not the events between the red arrows are either connected or are separated. And so when we look at this version, then the 7-year model that they're describing here causes the implication. I need to ask pre-tribbers to be a little bit more specific with me. I need to do my homework and look this up. So maybe I'll do this week. The pre-tribbers seem to describe the events between the one on the left and the one on the right in a manner that seems to indicate that they are not connected with one another. Indeed, I'm not even sure that the rapture must be connected to the 70th week at all in the pre-trib model. I need to research that part as well. Is the rapture even connected to the 7 years? Yes, according to pre-trib, it happens before the 7 years, but is it even part of the 7-year time frame? That's a question that can be asked. Meaning the chart looks like it is. Looks like the rapture is the first thing that happens, and then the 7 years kicks off. Maybe that's what they are saying. Who's to say that they're saying? Who's to say that they mean the rapture happens and then a few years passes and then the 7 years kicks off? Could be that. Are you understanding what I'm saying there? So the point is that when we go back to this one, and maybe I'll go ahead and modify this in post-production and fix it. I want you to understand that that blue time frame where it says Day of the Lord, i.e. wrath of God, I'm going to put is likely less than 7 years long. It's most definitely less than 7 years. It's most definitely, according to the pre-wrath model, it's definitely less than 7 years long, the Day of the Lord. It's most likely 5 months to a year long is the point I was trying to say. So let's conclude our study. Let me see. We've got about, I think, 10 minutes or so. 15 minutes. We're doing pretty good. We might be able to finish this chapter with Brother AARON EGGMAN. Jesus' coming is one time period that contains many events within it. It is initiated by his coming on the clouds. The Greek word for Jesus' second coming is the word parousia. Parousia is defined as in the third edition of the Greek-English Lexicon of the New Testament as, quote, an arrival and a continuing presence, end quote. You can see the footnote number I there down below that where Eggman lifted the quote from the Greek-English Lexicon of the New Testament. He goes on to say that Jesus' coming begins when he comes on the clouds and continues through the day of the Lord. His wrath is poured out during the day of the Lord and culminates with the Battle of Armageddon, which is why I keep going back to this slide here. The parousia that Brother Eggman just described must include at the beginning the rapture, and at least must include the second coming near the end. So the parousia also includes all those events in the middle. According to the pre-wrath model, notice it says it commences sometime after the midpoint of the week, after the Great Tribulation, after the sixth seal sign. God's wrath includes both the trumpets and the bowls, but not the seals. So I didn't put the time frame or how long the day of the Lord is, but I did mention the events, and this differentiates it from the pre-wrath model, the pre-trib model that I keep showing on the other side of the screen. Notice the pre-wrath model says that the day of the Lord includes trumpets and bowls, but not the seals, and it commences sometime after the midpoint of the week. By comparison, when you look at here we go. Oops, that's not the one I want. This one's fine. By comparison, when you look at the pre-trib rapture model, God's wrath starts at the very beginning of the 7 years, which means according to their model, God's wrath / tribulation includes all of the seals and all of the trumpets and all of the bowls. In other words, the tribulation / God's wrath is the entire 70th week. And the rapture takes place prior to any of that happening, meaning prior to the 7 years even kicking off. So this is the big difference. Remember I mentioned earlier, well, they look the same, right? You got rapture on the left and second coming on the right. And then when you look at this one, they look similar. And yet I'm telling you that no, there's a big enough difference. If you look at the details in the middle there, commences sometime after the midpoint of the week. Let's just make the where'd my bigger one go? Give me a second. I guess I must have closed it. There we go. Oops. Give me a moment. I'm lost in my slides. This is coming of Jesus. We don't want that. We want this one. I'll just leave it right there. I don't need it to be full screen. Oh yeah, yes I do. Oops, don't want that. Give me a moment, guys. There we go. So when you look at this, the details in the middle, the point being made by Brother AARON Eggman is that the Parousia is one single coming, yet two significant events, such like I mentioned in my slide here. And this Parousia commences after the midpoint, sometime after the midpoint of the week, after the Great Tribulation, after the sixth seal sign, and it includes trumpets, bowls, but not seals. So that's the main point that he's talking about now. So Jesus' coming begins when he comes on the clouds and continues through the day of the Lord. His wrath is poured out during the day of the Lord and culminates with the Battle of Armageddon. This is Brother AARON Eggman. Jesus coming on a white horse occurs at the Battle of Armageddon, which is yet another event within the larger time period of the coming of Jesus discussed in more detail in the chapter 22 of his book. I also wanted to point out that when you get to the book of Revelation, chapter 19, and you read about Jesus riding on a white horse, followed by the armies of heaven clothed in white robes, who are also on white horses, which may or may not be the recently married church. Some pre-tribbers would say it is the church. Other pre-wrathers and post-tribbers would say it's not the church, it's just the angels following with them. I'm not 100% convinced that it is the church. I have some reservation on that. But there are details in Revelation 19 that indicates that it could be the church. However, the point I'm trying to emphasize is that both groups come from heaven. Therefore, the cloud riding event that Daniel talked about earlier in Daniel chapter 7, and the cloud riding event that took place in Matthew chapter 24 around verse 29 through 31, and the cloud riding event that Paul talks about coming on the clouds and things like that, doesn't seem to be the same event that John speaks about in Revelation. And part of the detail is obvious. It's in our face. On one of those events, Jesus is riding on a cloud. And on the other event, he's riding on a horse. And I humorously joked, if we, like the post-tribbers, are going to say that these are the same event, that the rapture and that the second coming are one single event that happens simultaneously at the same time, or we instantly go up and then we instantly come back down, there are a number of questions that I need answered. And one of them is, where is that horse? Is the horse on the cloud? Because Jesus is on the horse in Revelation 19. But in the other passages, he's on a cloud. So is he on the horse and the horse is on the cloud? Or is Jesus on the cloud and the cloud is on top of the horse? You know, the horse and the cloud are competing with one another because Jesus is riding them. So I'm trying to picture this in my mind. Not to mention all the other horse riders, right? Where are they? And they came from heaven. All of them came from heaven. So even if you say that we immediately go up and then we immediately come down, you still have to say that we immediately go all the way up to heaven. If you say that we are the ones that are coming down, you post-tribbers out there who's fond of saying that these are the same events, you say we go up and then we come back down. I'm saying, well, okay, well, how far up do you go? Most post-tribbers say, well, we just go up into the air and we come back down to earth. We don't actually go up to heaven. Am I saying, but wait a minute. The people coming on horses are coming from heaven. So, we say, well, only they came from heaven. We don't have to come from heaven. But wait a minute. Are we the ones riding back with Jesus? Are we even on horses? I mean, there's a lot of details there that, trust me, the pre-wrath model actually solves those dilemmas, but I don't want to get into it right now. But nevertheless, Eggman says Jesus coming on a white horse occurs at the Battle of Armageddon instead of the rapture, and that's kind of what he's indicating. We have one more chart here by Brother Eggman, and let me look at my time. We've got about 5 minutes left. We can read this definition of the coming of Jesus, the Parousia, that I was kind of using my own slide for. But here's Brother Eggman's definition of the coming of Jesus as seen in his book, The Saints Go Up and the Wrath Comes Down. The coming of Jesus begins when the sign of the Son of Man appears in the sky, in which every eye will see Jesus coming on the clouds of heaven. This is going all the way back to Daniel chapter 7, but it's picked up most notably by Jesus himself in Matthew chapter 24, starting in about verse 29. At this time, Jesus sends forth his angels to gather his saints to meet him in the clouds. After his initial appearing, the coming of Jesus refers to the pouring out of his wrath on the earth and his arrival on a white horse with the armies of heaven for the Battle of Armageddon. So Brother Eggman is simply reminding us that in the pre-wrath model, something that's very helpful in the pre-wrath model is to, first of all, see that the coming of Jesus is one single event with several, at least two main details attached to it. Bookends is what I called them once, or one single coming with two events, if you want to call it that. I know Brother Richardson as well as Dr. Brown both kind of what we say, they kind of take shot at the pre-wrath model that says there's also two of them, and they say, what are there, two separate events? Are there two comings? Two comings of the Lord? Sorry. Sorry about that. Two comings of the Lord? No, not two comings. Brother Richardson seems to have a problem with the fact that these are separate events. He's like, no, I only read in the Bible of one coming. Yes, Brother Richardson, I do too. That's what we're saying. Don't get confused. We are describing one coming. We're just saying that there are two events attached to the one coming, right? That's not too difficult to picture and to postulate, because it happened during his first coming. There were several events attached to the first coming of Jesus into the world as well. So it's not without precedent. So Brother Eggman's making a very, very good point here. And so I think as I look past that, let me look, see how many slides do I want to go. He's got a few more. All right, I don't want to keep going. I think this is a great place to stop, like we did last time. Stop with a chart, the blue. So we're going to stop right here with the definition of the coming of Jesus, or Parousia. This word Parousia is very helpful when you think of it as one Parousia. Repeat after me. One Parousia, right? Now I'm into like indoctrination and gaslighting. I'm trying to gaslight you guys into believing in the pre-wrath rapture. Nope, not going to do that. I'm just trying to make a point, though. When you read through the Old Testament, there's one second coming. When you read through the New Testament, there's one second coming. There's one return of Christ, and yet when we harmonize all the passages, and I'm saying this in closing, when you harmonize all of the details regarding rapture details, like we see in the Olive Discourse, corroborated with the parallels of Paul in the Thessalonian letters, as well as the Corinthian letters, as well as the details in the book of Revelation, when you put all of them on the table, the best model that seems to describe and make sense of all of the data is that we're looking at one coming of the Lord, yet separate events connected to that one coming. And they're separate enough that they are seen as two different events, right? The movements are different, the people involved are different, the purposes of them are different, the details given in each passage are different. They seem to be two different events, rather than smashing them on top of one another like the post-tribbers do, the classic post-tribbers do, and conflating them with one another. I think it's better to see them as two separate events. But we're going to stop there. This is, again, making a case for the pre-wrath view. And we'll stop here with Brother Eggman's slide with this definition. We'll pick this up next week, but that'll do it for Eschatology, a biblical study of end-time events.